right, so in this video, we're gonna talk about dynamic microphones. So dynamic microphones are probably the most popular microphone to exist because they're so great for just about anything, and they're cheap usually, and they're very, very tough. You can practically hammer nails into walls with them if you had to. There's a famous joke right there around the microphone I'm actually gonna first talk about, which is the SM58 by Shure. This microphone, I'm sure you've seen, it's everywhere. There's all kinds of copies of it too because it's such a great microphone. The SM58 is a dynamic microphone that is perfect for just about anything. You can put it on any instrument, on any vocal, and it's going to sound good, and it won't take much effort, honestly. Now, it's not the best microphone for everything, but it will work for anything. Now, what exactly makes a dynamic microphone a dynamic microphone? Well, let's talk about that. So dynamic microphones like the SM58 contain a moving magnetic coil inside that moves back and forth in response to the sound pressure that hits it. So like your voice, when your voice hits that and goes, hello, it's like moving back and forth to you saying that. These microphones typically work well for live environments because they're so tough. People drop these things all the time. You see the famous rap artists or whatever drop them on the stage and they're fine. They also can take high levels of sound pressure. So things like a snare. Snares have a ton of volume and a ton of sound pressure that comes off of them. So a really, really delicate microphone wouldn't do well with them, but a dynamic microphone will definitely do well because it's meant to handle that kind of level. And they're also really great at rejecting what we call off-axis sound. So off-axis sound is basically the difference between capturing something that's directly in front of it versus what's off to the side. It's off-axis from it. So dynamic microphones are really directional. So they tend to be really good at only picking up what's right in front of them, and everything else around it, off to the sides of it and whatnot, it rejects it. So that's a lot of times why you see 58s as a vocal mic, because they're so good at rejecting all the drum bleed from it. Maybe if you have live guitar amps on stage, it helps cut them down too. All that stuff it's not picked up nearly as much as it could be if it were a different kind of microphone, because dynamic microphones like the 58 are so good at just picking up what's directly in front of it. Now, there are some trade-offs with dynamic microphones in that mainly, while they are cheap because there's not a lot of components to them, it also means that they don't always sound the best. I said that earlier in that it's not always the best microphone. You see, dynamic microphones don't pick up detail as well as some other ones do. So dynamic microphones aren't great for things like, say, a beautiful orchestral symphony. We're not going to use a ton of dynamic microphones on that because we want to hear every little nuance of that. But if it's just a vocal on a loud stage where we're trying to capture just it and nothing else, even though there's a loud drum kit and live amps behind us and echoing from the small room we're in, that's when a dynamic microphone works really well. As well as they just sound great on certain things like electric guitar amps, snare drums, toms even. Those are some great spots where things like a 57, which is also another dynamic microphone, it's actually kind of the same as a 58 to be honest. Using those kinds of microphones are perfect because they're great at capturing the high SPL information and they sound great doing it, and they don't have to pick up a ton of detail because there's not a lot of detail to capture. All right, so let's move on to the next video where we talk about condenser microphones.